Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. So we're on to part 2 of our review of the Beatles' Revolver. And if you're here, chances are you've listened to the first part, so thank you. The first part, which we'll call Side A. This is Side B. We had to flip the vinyl, drop the needle, and now we're on to Side B, the flip side of the record. Just as a quick rundown of where we were, the Beatles during this time in their career were very much at a point where they were flat out exhausted. Okay, the year was 1966. They were done with touring, and we talked a lot about this in the last episode about the fact that they could never hear themselves in concert anyway. And in Paul's words, if we can't hear ourselves, we can't get better. So the idea was, okay, we go off the road. And if you didn't see us, sorry about that. You still got recordings. Go enjoy the tapes, but we're not going to do that again. But the idea was, okay, now the performance, right? The stage show is the album. The album is the performance from start to finish. So it'll feel like you're at a Beatles concert, except for all the screaming girls. Nothing wrong with screaming girls, trying to make a point. So that's where we are in 1966. They released Rubber Soul earlier in the year, and Rubber Soul was a departure from what we'd seen from this band before. Not a vast departure, but enough where even the most ardent critic at that time could look at this band and say, okay, something's changed. They're not what I thought they were. They were not merely just head bopping, matching suits, foot tapping, she loves you, yeah, screaming at the top of their lungs. This is something more. This is something more substantial, right? Something heavier. And then, of course, we get to the album that we're talking about today, which is Revolver, which is, for my money, a game changer. And as we said before, if Rubber Soul changed the game, right, then Revolver very much turned everything upside down. For my money, they're still trying to make this album, as well as Rubber Soul, to this day. So, Phil, here we are into Side B, again, the flip side of Revolver. So, a quick rundown of the tracks from Side A, kids, if you're following along. 7 tracks on each side. Side A, Taxman, followed by Eleanor Rigby, I'm Only Sleeping, Love You Too, Here, There, and Everywhere, Yellow Submarine, She Said. Phil, as we go into Side 2, what is your overall opinion of Side 1? Let's say that this album was just 7 songs. What do you think about Side 1 being an entire album by itself?
I think it's great. I think it's a nice kind of peek into how much the band has evolved. It's a nice peek into how much each individual member of the band has grown as an artist. I think if this, in a nutshell, was just like a time capsule of where the Beatles were at that period in their careers, I think it's very illuminating.
For sure. And yeah, the evolution of the band is very apparent here. And I think that we're all, and unless you lived during that time period. I mean, by the time I came along, kids, the Beatles have been broken up for a while. So no, hold your ridiculous jokes to yourself. I'm not that old, but a few years anyway. So yeah, by the time I came along, it was over, and we were on to all the solo careers at that point. But man, I was thinking about this going into today's show, and it's something I've pondered myself before and had conversations about. Without going too deep, as we're kicking off this show here today, I mean, have we seen another band that has come as far and done as much? And here we are, what are we, 40 years after the fact, and this band continues to be talked about. Every time they do a re-release, they enter the Billboard top 10. I mean, they continue to sell records. Their sound is timeless. Like, I mean, everyone's got their favorites, Phil, but do you think that we've seen another band that quite holds up to this example?
I don't know that we do, because I don't know if we've seen a band that had the early success that they did and then completely changed trajectory.
Mm.
And then not just that, have so much of an influence on rock music the way that they did. I mean, you could argue what their influence was as a band. You could argue what their influence was as solo artists. I'm not sure if you can. I think that they are far and away probably the most one of the most influential music acts of all time.
Yeah, influential, and we've talked about this in other Beatles episodes here, right? But how many artists would not be in the business? Would never have been in the business. And by the way, there's been enough time now, kids, where they would have been inspired, gotten into the business, had a Hall of Fame career, been in touch with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then retire. Don't forget those guys and gals. But how many people would never have set foot in this business, in the record business, if not for the Beatles? It's staggering to me how again they changed everything. I mean, the techniques they use in the studio, which become apparent on this album, Rubber Soul, obviously on the White Album, obviously on Sergeant Pepper, innovative. That's what they were. They were ahead of their time in many ways. And you know something, Phil, to be honest, they could have kept touring another couple of years. They could have kept cashing those checks. They could have kept, with the decoy cars and the girls all over them, and God knows what was happening behind the scenes in hotel rooms and whatnot. And they could have kept that up and
Hmm.
just, made bank. But Lennon and McCartney together, who were wise beyond their years, honestly, said, no, we want something deeper. We can't just keep doing this all the time, man. Kudos to them for that.
Yeah, I agree. They could have easily just rested on their laurels. They could have stayed the act that they initially debuted at. Um, and they probably would have still been probably a popular act, but I don't think they would have had the revered career that they did if they didn't change direction and try and do other things.
Yeah, for sure. Again, the willingness to innovate, the desire to evolve, the need to do something more. These guys were saying at what age 20, 21, that they wanted to write songs for other artists. And I remember John saying in that old clip, it's a great clip where John says, I can't imagine being 40 years old and standing on a stage somewhere singing She Loves You and shaking my head. I mean, dude, they were already looking down the road to like, no, no, one day we'll be considered serious artists. Like they already had the presence of mind. I don't know how smart you were at age 20, Phil, but I don't remember being that smart.
I definitely don't think I was that ambitious at
Right.
20.
Yeah, man. Just being able to see past your own nose, which a lot of us have an issue with. They didn't. They knew exactly what they wanted. They went for it. Kids, let's kick off side two. Side A, as we said, 7 songs, a total runtime of 18 minutes, 33 seconds. Side two is not much different. Side two begins with your boy Paul on lead vocals with Good Day Sunshine. We had a lot of departures on side one, Phil, from what the Beatles would typically sound like or what we expect them to typically sound like at this time. But we open up side two with a bit of vaudeville. You got the dueling pianos playing together, or playing together anyway in sync, and the sound of this song like something from Piano Hall, like a sing along. I've heard this song catch some flack over the years, but over the years, man, I've listened to this song so many times. This is a Beatles song. Like, yeah, it's a Paul song first, right? But the guys singing together, it sounds good. It's sharp. It's crisp. The way the piano comes in, front like fades in the beginning, the sound of the song, it's just clean. It sounds as sharp today as it was the day it was released. What's your take on Good Day Sunshine?
I feel like in some ways this is a little bit of departure from their music, but I can see this fitting with some of their earlier catalog as well. And it's definitely Paul's kind of happy-go-lucky um, music. It definitely fits in his pocket. This is the kind of music he likes to make. He kept making this music later in the catalog. He kept making this kind of music as a solo artist. He likes his. I don't want to say I don't want to say campy. Campy is not the right word, but he likes this kind of music. And and so I think if you're one of those guys that doesn't like the sanitized, um, more happy, whimsical Beatles music, I can see you not liking this.
I mean, I'm just remembering the Lounge Lizard version or the song "You Know My Name, Look Up the Number," where he sounds like he's singing in a nightclub, a dark nightclub somewhere. That's Paul, like playful, ridiculous,
Yeah.
silly, tongue in cheek. I don't know if this song actually goes to that extent, but honestly, I can see where some people would have a problem with this song, but I just don't. I don't dislike this song at all.
No, I don't dislike the song, and I think that there are highlights of the Beatles catalog where Paul makes this kind of music. Like, just think like Martha, My Dear, for example. That is a song that is very much in the same lane. It's not the exact same song, but it's his kind of music. The happy-go-lucky piano music, that's his thing.
Mm.
And I don't dislike it.
Does it fit on this album, you think?
I think it does. I think if anything, this is the closest to a midway point between where they were and where they're going.
Good call. Yeah. We got a lot of that on River Soul and this album. And then by Pepper, you're like, oh God, what happened? Like
Yeah.
in a good way, right?
Yeah, I think if you are confused by like some of the psychedelic stuff on the first half of the album, um, this song on the second album, I mean the second half of the album, as a opening song, it definitely probably put your mind at ease. Like, oh yeah, this is the same band I knew.
And let's be honest, as we said in part one of this review, nobody could write a 2-minute pop song like Lennon and McCartney. Just
Yeah.
nobody could. Nobody could. This song, Phil, famously inspired by the Loving Spoonful's Daydream, which by itself is another great song. And I don't think it can't be stated enough how big of a band that was for their time. And they had a string of hits and they sounded great, great vocals, great little band. And they were inspirational for other acts that came after them. But Paul heard this song and loved it and essentially wrote this song. And I think the story goes once he wrote it, he sent it to them and they were knocked out and they were like, of course, floored. And they were very much bowled over by the fact that two guys who are the best in the game would have done this because they were inspired. But Phil, there's something to be said for John and Paul. They never stopped being music fans. Like we hear
Mhm.
about NBA players. If you've watched the Bill Russell documentary, right? Like toward the end of his career as a player, he began to see it was ridiculous. Like I'm a grown man in shorts running around a basket. He started to feel like, I'm over this. But like
Yeah.
Lennon and McCartney never stopped being music fans. What they were good at, they never stopped being fans themselves. So, what do you think about them drawing inspiration here? Because they've done it before with the Beach Boys and other bands.
Yeah, I think they've always been very transparent about their influences, and I think that they've always done a really good job of including their inspirations in their music and letting the people that inspired them know that that's what I'm doing instead of just going like, I don't know where I got this from, just something I thought up.
Right, right.
I did chuckle to myself when you said daydreaming at first, and I was like, is he talking about like the Austin Roberts music from Scooby Doo?
Uh, oh wow, yeah, that's another callback right there. This song written at John's house, Kenwood, which was in Surrey, England.
Mhm.
Paul drawing inspiration from the sunny day. Well, you can hear that. This whole song sounds like a sunny day to me, man.
It does.
He later said that John helped write the song, but it was basically his. Lennon recalled the song was Paul's, and he perhaps threw in a line or something. I like that how they just offhandedly throw these comments around. That was good. So yes, Paul was trying to write a song in the same vein as Lovin' Spoonful's Daydream. The story goes that Lennon and George attended the Lovin' Spoonful's concert at the Marquee in London in April of '66, and the Beatles and members of Rolling Stones soon lauded them as the hot new group. Again, very, very cool. There's also been conjecture that the Kinks' Sunny Afternoon could have been another source of inspiration for McCartney. And actually, I kind of hear that now in my head.
Hmm.
That kind of makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm a fan of this. I've heard things over the years. It doesn't belong. It doesn't fit this album. Like, come on, man, it's the Beatles. Stop. Like, Paul's the top two Beatles here. I mean, come on, man. And that's maybe even disrespecting George a little bit. So, I mean, he's one of the forces out in front of this group. I mean, come on. It's I don't know. I just don't get the criticism sometimes when it comes to these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it doesn't fit, and I think that the trend we're seeing from Rubber Soul up is that these guys started peaking creatively and wanting to do their own thing. And if there is some kind of clash of styles here, I feel like you can only attribute that to Paul is peaking creatively and doing what he wants to do, and I don't think anybody can really argue that at that time period he was peaking in the same way that George started peaking later, because I feel like around this time the way he played bass very much improved. I thought he his bass playing got much better. I think his style of songwriting changed. So I mean, if anything, it just showed that he just wasn't the same artist anymore.
100%. Yeah, well said. Yeah, again, Phil, I keep going back to the word evolution. I think that's what we're seeing here. Track two on side two, again, pop songs, 2 minute pop songs. What was the line from that thing you do? I want something catchy. I want something, I want something that pops,
Snappy.
right?
Oh,
Snappy, that's
snappy.
it. Yeah. This track, talk about songs that maybe get a little hate over the years. And Your Bird Can Sing. This is Lennon on lead vocals, 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Again, the classic 2 minute Beatles pop song. If you know the take of this from the anthology, they're all laughing. They're giggling like girls. And I don't know if they were smoking weed or not, but I always assumed they were. They were high when they were laughing. It's hilarious. Look, I'm a fan of this song. Again, I guess I'm such a biased Beatles guy, Phil. I don't understand hate leveled at this band sometimes. But again, if I'm being straight, if I heard someone say, I don't really care for that, I'm not going to try to talk them out of it. Now, if you tell me you don't like Hey Jude, I legit think you've been hit, dropped on your head as a child. But if you say I'm not a big fan of And Your Bird Can Sing, you know what? I'm okay with that. What's your take on this tune?
I feel like And Your Bird Can Sing is one of those things where artistically you can sit and try and interpret what the song is about and come up with like some pretty good like storytelling devices, or come up with like some good conventions as to how this fits with the rest of the album sequencing wise, and all these other critiques you can come up with. And somewhere in the afterlife, John was just like, nah, I just made this song goofing off when I was high. And it's this definitely one of those songs like I Dig a Pony, where people were like, yeah, what does this song mean? He's just kind of like, that this just was some nonsense I wrote one day. But I've always read this song to be kind of one of those things where yeah, you say you're better off without me. You say that you have all these other things, but you don't have me. You don't have what I do.
Yeah, it's good. Haven't we all told a woman that at some point in our lives, Phil? Be honest.
um Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you want to follow the sequencing of this album, and you go back to early in the album where John is singing about finding love and the newness of love, and then we break up with this woman. It's just like, yeah, but might be happy over there, but are you? Are you really happy?
I mean, I've heard this phrase in other ways, like, you can get with this or you can get with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on, what are we doing?
Are you really happy with that guy over there? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Because this is where it's at. To your point, John didn't care much for this. This is one of the famous stories behind this song. Dismissed it, called it substandard. Never talked about And Your Bird Can Sing. Didn't want to talk about it. I guess whenever he was asked about it, he's like, no, we're going to move on and go to the next subject. He didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
This is good too. I never knew this part. His first wife, Cynthia, says that the song was inspired by her presenting Lennon with a clockwork bird inside a gilded cage wrapped in gift paper, apart from the wind up mechanism. She wound up the bird as she handed it the present to John, so that it sang, leaving him with an expression of sheer disbelief on his face as he removed the wrapping paper. Lennon viewed the cage imitation bird as a metaphor for his marriage and a reflection of Cynthia's inability to understand him. The song's working title was You Don't Get Me. So Phil, this kind of backfired for him.
Oh my God. It's
Jesus.
kind of mean.
Yeah. God.
This is such a happy song, it sounds like, and it's just that's kind of mean.
I mean, let's just remember who cheated on who here, Phil. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, but this is also a trend you can follow through this part of the Beatles' career moving up, and just how happy Paul always sounds about the current girl he's dating, and at the same time, John is having like this inner turmoil from his relationship with his longtime girlfriend that he married, and you just see this thing getting worse and worse going up through their catalog until you introduce Yoko into the mix.
Yeah, and I mean, again, back to what John personally thought of this. I guess him saying he didn't want to talk about it and him dismissing it wasn't enough because people have speculated on this for years, trying to figure out what this is all about. Hey, Tom Clark here for Tom Clark's Main Event, and if you are not subscribed, you're doing life wrong. Going strong since 2014 with over 300 episodes and a variety of guests that include Randy Orton, The Big Show, Rob Van Dam, and a lot more. Check us out on all the major platforms, including YouTube at Boink Studios. Subscribe today, Tom Clark's Main Event. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, the guy dismissed it. He wrote it. Just leave it alone. I don't know. It just seems like all we do is just pick this band apart and search for deep meaning where there's no deep meaning. And when there is deep meaning, Phil, everyone tends to miss it.
Yeah. Well, I think Lennon was very much one of those artists that he was in the moment when he created. And I think in the moment, a lot of times we've seen him at some of his low periods with drugs and other things that he created something that sounded good at the moment. And I could see him coming back in a more lucid state of mind and going, no, I hate this. And I get it. I don't think that's like some deep thing, and I don't think that should ruin anybody that enjoyed those songs enjoyment of them. But I mean, the artist is always going to have their opinion of things. Look, I mean, this is somebody that writes. Sometimes we write things and we're like our worst critics on these things. I've written things before and I'm like, I hate it, but other people seem to like it. So it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a fun little song. Again, if someone says that they kind of get it, or that they don't really care for, I kind of get it. I'm not going to hate anybody for that. I can kind of understand where they're coming from. I mean, this song, does it break any new ground? No. Can we say it is as important to this album as Eleanor Rigby is, or as Taxman is? No, I don't know if we could say that, but I don't know if we need to. It's the Beatles. It's what they did. Like you said, he was in the moment. It's something he wanted to do. They made it work. It fits. For me, it fits.
Yeah, I think it fits tonally with where they were as a group. I think it fits tonally with where John Lennon was in his life. I mean, even I never knew that part about Cynthia, but it totally fits with where he was with his life. And telling you, if you follow that trajectory, it is kind of depressing that had such a tumultuous period with his wife, and it just didn't really end well. But wasn't really a good way for it then, I suppose.
No, no, because not when Yoko comes in the picture and everything changes.
Yeah. I think that was one of those things where we all know we all know people who married their high school sweetheart. Sometimes it works out really well. Sometimes you feel like you have to marry this person because you always dreamed that that's what you were going to do. And then you grow up and you become an adult and you realize, like, no, I don't get along with this person at all. This person doesn't understand me. I met this person when I didn't really know who I was yet.
Good call.
And I think that's what Lennon experienced. And I don't think that makes everything he did during his marriage or how he treated her right. But he was very young when he got married. He was the first Beatle to get married. And even that, like, even just when you look at like the two halves of their catalog, when you look at the half where they were, the guys in the suits that were just like cookie cutter. Everybody looked the same. Everybody had like a marketable personality. He was the guy that was married. And then when you see the second half of their catalog, that facade kind of falls away.
It's funny because I was listening to another Beatles podcast recently, and Mark Lewison was the guest, and he was, and I don't know the gentleman's name, but he was telling the story of because it just popped in my head. You mentioned suits. The guy who made their suits was on the train heading to a concentration camp when
Wow.
he managed to jump off the train and escape. I mean, dude, some of the stories connected to this band just by happenstance are some of the most, not bizarre, but some of those interesting stories you'll ever read about not just the band members, but people connected to them. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good stuff here, kids. Again, I'm a fan of this song. Track number 3, another departure. 2 minutes and 3 seconds. This is For No One with Paul on lead vocal. When he wrote Yesterday, I think pretty much the entire music business stopped and said, and again, even then, Phil, what was that 63, I guess, 64? When that happened, if you had dismissed them, that could have been the song that made you go, "Wait a minute, who's singing this again? That's the Beatles?" Because it was extremely different than anything they'd ever done. I don't know if For No One is, held in the same regard as Yesterday. I would suspect for the wide audience, maybe not. And because this song is a little bit more, maybe cheerful is the wrong word. It's a little bit more up tempo, perhaps, than Yesterday is. Dude, this is one of the saddest songs. And brother, I've gone through breakups before, and this is one of those songs that I gravitate to. And let me tell you, it's not something to listen to when you're going through a breakup because it's not going to make you feel any better. But it's one of those songs that just, speaks to you on a different level. What do you think about For No One?
I think when you talk about here, there, and everywhere, and how, if I remember how I described it in the first half of this episode, it perfectly illustrates like the hopefulness of being in love and finding new love. And I think this song perfectly describes like the clinging to something that is just not there anymore. It's just gone. And you're right, it is very depressing for that reason. It is the polar opposite of here, there, and everywhere. Um, I feel like they almost work as companion pieces in some
Ooh, yeah.
ways. Um, and I think because of that, it fits so well on this album, and I feel like it kind of shows his versatility as a writer.
Oh, dude, 100%. Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah, he's flexing his muscles a little bit on this album. Not like he didn't do it before, but man, he's flexing a little bit. Like you said, he's showing what he can do here. Dude, I love the idea of Here and There and Everywhere being the relationship is new and you're so in love, and then For No One is it's over. That's crazy. Don't listen to it back to back, kids. You may want to, jump off a bridge or something. Don't do that. Does this song fit on Revolver?
Yeah, I think it does. I think and again, if this is like an evolution of who they are as a band, of evolution of McCartney's writing style, and what this album represents for them, I think it absolutely fits.
The song built on a descending scale progression, which you can hear. And if you're a music fan, you will listen. And just when the bass can't get any lower and it hits the absolute lowest it can go, then it suddenly steps back up. And you can follow this song again, like you're walking down the stairs and then walking back up. That's what this song sounds like to me. Like, and even though there's no hope, there's really no hope in this song, Phil. It doesn't, I don't know, while it's sad and a little bit depressing, it could have been insanely depressing. But I think the music prevents it from doing that. Is the French horn the best part of this song?
Yeah, I would say so. I think to your point, it doesn't have like a cold tone to it. It doesn't sound like dour, sad music. Like when you listen to Yesterday, it has kind of a dour tone to it. This song doesn't. It has an upbeat it's upbeat and it has warm tones to it. So, I mean, if you're just listening to it for the music, it doesn't sound like a sad song, but once you listen to the lyrics, it's absolutely a sad song.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Supposedly he wrote this while he was on vacation in the Swiss Alps because if you're a Beatle, you vacation in the Swiss Alps. And he was no shade. I'm just saying. And he was with his girlfriend Jane Asher. And dude, Phil, I know you know about Jane Asher. I would suspect this is one of those romances that when it didn't work, everybody was surprised because like they've been together for a long time and seemed to be insanely in love. He wrote songs about her, or supposedly, or whatever. But apparently, this was about that as well. When questioned about it, Paul simply said, I suspect it was about another argument. So apparently they were, hot and cold. Listen, the best relationships, maybe not the best relationships, but maybe the most intense relationship you can have with a significant other is like when you love them, you really love them. But man, that causes the arguments to be that much worse because like you're just, the passion is at an all time high with the other person, which I suspect is maybe what was going on here. The song's working title was Why Did It Die?
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
uh, yeah, and I mean, look, we're both men here, and you know that when you're with a woman, when a woman is madly in love with you, they do anything for you. But when a woman is done, she's done,
she's
and
done.
it's very apparent that she's done. There's nothing you can do to fix it. There's
No,
nothing you can do to change it. And I feel like the song, it just pretty much it depicts that period in a relationship on from a man's perspective that From your perspective, it's just like, well, no, I'm kind of still in the same place. Why aren't you still in the same place?
Yeah, women have a switch, Phil. Women have a switch, they can turn it off. I don't know how they do it. I've never been able to do it. Man, what a gift that is to just be able to turn it off. That way at least you don't have to struggle that much afterward, but man, they just turn it off.
And I don't know if it's that women completely turn it off. I just think that once women make the decision, they're done. They're done.
There's a great scene from Fred Claus when Vince Vaughn is down the street, and he misses misses dinner with his girlfriend, and he's yelling at her from the street, and she's yelling at him from the window, and she goes, "I can't take this anymore," and he goes, "I can take it still." Like everything she says to him, he just flips it back on her, like, "No, I'm not." She goes, I'm done." He's like, "I'm not done." He goes, "I can't take this anymore. I can take it still." It's kind of the same thing. Like, "Nope, I'm over it." And he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm good. Let's talk about this." So yeah. This song has received its flowers through the years, man, as being one of Paul's best ballads, and some people have called it perhaps his greatest ballad. I don't know if I go that far, but it is a beautiful song, man. Is this one of those songs for you? You got to be in a certain mindset to listen to it. Can you just listen to it?
Well, it depends. I
Hmm.
feel like I feel like it's a song that's good with the album, but if you have gone through uh, a very bad breakup, it is kind of hard to listen to.
Mm.
So I feel like it depends on what your connection to this song is.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Listen, the next song, because I'm looking ahead here in my notes. The next song, because I got thoughts on this. Dr. Robert. This is John back on lead vocal. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I'm not saying this is a skip, but if I tell you I never skipped it, I'd be lying. And I love this album. I can listen to the whole album from end to end and never skip anything. I'm not a major fan of Dr. Robert. What's your thoughts on this song?
I'm not a huge fan of it. I understand its purpose on the album. I feel like it does fit with the rest of the tone of the album. When you think of songs like "Good Day Sunshine" and "Yellow Submarine," it has that same kind of upbeat and I keep thinking campy, but campy is not the word I want to use. And for whatever reason, that word just wants to keep popping up. It's not campy, but it has that same kind of happy-go-lucky sound to it.
It's like a
Uh,
satire or something, right? Yeah.
yeah. It has that kind of that same humor that you see in a lot of Beatles music.
Yeah, and honestly, speaking of music, I think the music of this song is great. I don't have an issue with how it sounds at all.
Yeah.
Just not a big fan of the song. This is another song, Phil, that's been debated over the years about what is it about exactly. But to be honest with you, this song's about drugs. And drugs are bad, okay? So, what do you know about the history of this? I mean, how much of this do you know? I'm like, do you have your own theories about what this is?
I don't have any theories about Dr. Roberts. Uh, I I know that a good amount of this album feels like it's about drugs. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
because these guys were very heavily on drugs during this period. So, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, the character that's in this song is keeping in. Let's see, someone that has written that the character is in keeping with the idea of a Doctor Feelgood, a physician who prescribed drugs such as amphetamines under the guise of legitimate medical practice. John recalled that Paul might have helped him write the Well Bridge, which actually makes a lot of sense. Despite this, most of the song is almost all John's brainchild, which I hear 100%. I mean, this just sounds like it's a lot of the same rhythm, a lot of the same chords, obviously. The composition of the song is fine. I don't have an issue with any of that. I just, again, as a complete package, I'm just not a major fan of this. In the book Beatles 66, author Steve Turner says that Lennon was possibly encouraged to write about a drug supplier after discussing Mother's Little Helper, a song from the Rolling Stones just released Aftermath album with Mick Jagger when Jagger had attended a recent session for Revolver. And he was at those sessions. You can go
Hmm.
back and look at studio pics, and he's hanging out with John and Paul and Ringo and George in the studio. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's other bands writing the same sorts of songs. Donovan had a track in 65 called Candyman as a song that might have served as an example for John. It's a song about drugs, right? But like, I don't know. And look, dude, I'm not going to give these guys a pass for taking drugs just because I'm a fan of the group. But we also need to remember that drugs in 1966 are not drugs in 2023. There's a vast difference. People are taking them during this time to become enlightened, I guess, to reach another plane of existence. As goofball as that sounds, they weren't necessarily about I have to get high or I'll die, which is what drugs are now, right? So like the hallucinogenics and everything, I just again not giving them a pass, Phil, but like when people frown on this band for that stuff, I'm like, man, did you live back then in that culture? Do you know what was going on in the world? Do you know what they were doing? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your take on the whole Beatles and drug connection through the years with these guys?
I mean, I think recreational drugs at that time were just different.
Mm,
This was before the period where it felt like drugs became such a global pandemic and it became such a uh, horror story that people threw on people. Um, it just was a different time. Um, it seemed like a lot of the stuff around drugs at that time was about people just trying to have a good time. And that's not to say that people now that take drugs aren't also trying to have a good time, but I just feel like the tone around a lot of drug use has changed.
yeah,
And especially in Hollywood, because there was a time period where it was seen as that way. Ah, it's just a gag. It's just like, oh well, people behind closed doors do this. But when celebrities started dying and stuff because of it, then that completely changed everything.
for sure. Yeah, the whole perception changed, and rightfully so. I'm not going to go through all the conspiracy theories here, Phil, but I will tell you about one. Let's see. It's been speculated that Dr. Robert Freeman, a New York doctor known for dispensing vitamin B12 shots, not bad, but laced with amphetamines to wealthy clientele. He was age 60 in 1966. He was German-born Manhattan physician known to New York artists and wealthier citizens for his injections. I don't know. I mean, there's been speculation that he's the Dr. Robert here. I don't know. Dude, can I ask you a question? Would John have been so blunt to name the doctor in the song?
Maybe. I don't know.
Hmm. It is
Maybe.
John, right?
I mean, at that time period, John, I don't know. I do think that we saw John through this period up be kind of self-destructive, for a lack of better words. So would I be surprised? No. It does seem pretty bold to do that, but this is also a man that made that famous quote about God. So
It's true.
I don't know.
And of course, one of the famous figures that have been speculated over the years that could be Dr. Robert is Bob Dylan because he
Yeah.
introduced the Beatles to weed in the summer of 64.
Maybe so.
We're going to move on from this drug stuff, kids. Jesus, just say no. What's wrong with you people? Uh, this is track number 5. We finally have George. It took 5 songs to get him here on side 2, which is nuts because he has 2 songs on side 1 and only gets the one on side 2. This is I Want to Tell You. Dude, the instrumentation of this song is so different. That piano that sounds like it's out of tune, and it's a little unsettling when you hear it. If you hear that piano by itself, I bet it's very unsettling if you just isolate the piano track. But I don't know if it really fits here, but it's iconic now. It's part of the song. What do you think about I Want to Tell You? As a George fan, what's your take on this song?
Every time I hear this, it has that same kind of guitar at the beginning as Day Tripper.
Yep.
And so when I hear it, it makes me think they're gonna start playing Day Tripper, but they're not. They're playing something completely different. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if that's a callback to Day Tripper or not. But I always think about it when I hear this. I like this song. I like it because I feel like it is such a good song to almost seamlessly go into the next song. Because they have kind of the same tone. It feels like they're about the same subject matter. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and this is another song where it feels very much like George experimenting with drugs and talking about his creative process after experimenting with drugs. Yeah, the second half of this album is it feels like a lot of this was written on drugs. Um, but yeah, I like the song a lot. Like you said, I think the instrumentation on here is incredible. I think again, if this is one of those songs for that time period, I think the psychedelic vibe for it fits. I think it fits very well with a lot of songs from the first half of the album. Um, I think it's great. I don't. Did George write this song?
This song is written by George, yes.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think again it's showing that he's growing as a songwriter. I don't know. I don't have any issues with this song. I don't see how anybody really could, but subjective, I suppose.
And let's try to frame this, kids, if we can here for you to kind of give you a background of what we're talking about here. George was beginning to get a lot more creative. Indian music was starting to get into his vocabulary. He was learning how to play the sitar. He had met and was probably spending some time with Ravi Shankar, who, by all accounts, is just a stand up guy and an excellent musician in his own right. And the Beatles film that was supposed to have happened, which was called A Talent for Loving, was supposed to have been their third film for United Artists, did not happen. So the block of time they had reserved for that film to be done, they had the time back to themselves. So he just goes on this binge of writing songs. He writes this song in early '66. Some of the Indian influences are coming out. You can hear it a little bit in this tune. You can hear it a lot in other of his contributions to the band. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. And, you could always make the argument, Phil, that like without the time off, would he have gone onto that creative binge? He had it in him anyway. But again, George is really starting to come into his own here. And I think you're really seeing between this album of For Sure and Rubber Soul that he's really becoming the third force to be reckoned with in this album. Do you think this song in particular, how important is it for his personal catalog of his contributions to this band, you think?
I think it's important if you're following like his creative process going forward from this album. I don't know if I would say it's one of his better songs or it's important for his time as a Beatle. Like I said, I think it's a good song, but I don't think anybody looks back at this song and goes, "Yeah, that was the song that was his breakout breakout performance." I think Taxman is a lot more important to him off this album.
I see that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, honestly. I can't really argue that point. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of, deep meaning behind this song, kids. Basically, I mean, well, it is another drug song, right? I mean, George was experimenting with LSD as they all four were, I believe, at this time. I think that's pretty
Yeah,
apparent in his autobiography. By the way, have you read his autobiography, I Mean Mine?
I have not.
I bet that's a fascinating read. I need to pick that up. He says, I want to tell you addresses the avalanche of thoughts that are so hard to write down or say or transmit. And this song, certain people have said this song, along with Rain and Within and Without You, early examples of the Beatles abandoning the coy statements in their lyrics and instead adopting an urgent one intent on channeling some essential knowledge, the psychological and or physical epiphanies of LSD experience to their listeners. That's an easy way of saying they've taken a lot of drugs here.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best interpretation of the song, though. I think essentially, if you're taking a literal interpretation of the song, I feel like this is the artist process of having so many things that you want to get down on this blank canvas and not being able to articulate it well right away and not being able to get it all out.
Yeah, I love that. Very true.
I feel like as somebody that has done drawing, has done some painting, and has written. I think that's one of the gifts and curse of being an artist. That um, there's nothing more cool than being able to take something blank and turn it into something. I've said many times, I feel like as a writer and an artist, I feel like it's magic. It's like you're taking this thing that is nothing and turning it into something meaningful. Um, and I don't think there's any experience that's more fulfilling in the world, at least to me. But at the same time, there's nothing more daunting than a blank piece of paper when you're trying to really create something.
Yeah, dude. If you sit down trying to write, stop. It just happens. It has to happen. Unless you have an assignment, you're on the clock, right? But if you just, I'm going to sit down and write today. Well, you just screwed yourself probably because
Yeah,
it doesn't work
yeah,
that way.
yeah. Because man, look the blankness of this page, and look like I've got to get this into something. I've got to get this into 1,000 words or whatever. Sometimes it could be really scary. It could be very intimidating. Like I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I mean that's why a lot of times when you go into writing, especially, um, I try not to think about it at all. I just go in and just start writing, and I can go in and just take things away or add things later. But when you're just thinking, I have to make this into something, it is very scary.
And folks, if you're not of the creative mindset, nothing wrong with that. But just so you know, if you're not, it is the most frustrating thing in the world to not be able to get out of your head what you see in your head. It's so
Yes,
frustrating. And for things and also to go along with that, the worst critic you'll ever have as a creative is you. No one else could slander your work or besmirch it or criticize it better than you could. I promise you that because I do it all the time.
absolutely. And I'm sure we all know, sometimes something sounds really good. It looks really good in your head, but then you get this thing out on paper or you finish this thing and it's just not what you thought it would be. It sounds so much better in your head.
100%. Yeah. Speaking of creative types, the next guy up at 2 minutes and 31 seconds is Sir Paul McCartney with Got to Get You Into My Life. Is this the most well-known song on this album next to Eleanor Rigby if you're talking about the wide mass audience?
I would say that it is. It is absolutely my favorite song on the album. Um, I would almost venture to say it's the best song on the album.
Mm.
Um, I don't know how old you were when you realized this song was not about love and it was about LSD. um, I don't know, but I it was definitely one of those things where I was like, "Oh, this is great," and then I found out what it was actually about. Um, but it's still a great song. It is. It turned out to be probably one of the most famous Beatles covers of all time because of Earth, Wind, and Fire. It's a great song.
Oh, the big horns and everything, dude. It's like, yeah, this is good stuff, man. Again, the instrumentation, the way the song's put together, everything about it. It's a beautiful song, colorful. Like, I don't know if you can hear color, but if you can, this is it. Like, only way I can really describe it. I mean, the brass in the song is fantastic. Everything about this song fits together. It's nuts how much this song works. And this is very much, even though, as we said, the roots of this are not technically a love song, this is very much a Paul song, right?
Yeah, I agree. It does sound very colorful. It does sound like what you would imagine turns into some of those drawings of the Beatles later in their career, for like the cover of Yellow Submarine. That's what this song sounds like. It sounds like one of those like super trippy, psychedelic cartoons from that era.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it is weird that I know people that don't know "Got to Get You Into My Life" is a Beatles cover. By the way, I know some people that think that's an Earth, Wind and Fire song because the cover is just so famous.
It's true. And this, you're right about the origin. This song's about weed. The whole song is. It's dedicated to weed, which is weird. So Paul's way of saying, "Oh, I love the weed." They didn't call it that. I wonder what they called it then. I guess just pot. I don't know. But yeah, here's a nice little tidbit, interesting stuff. A cover version of this song by Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers in England. And Phil, you know all about Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. We all do. What a phenomenal band. Legends. But anyway, their cover version went to number 6 on the UK charts. Like, that's the power of this guy. That's the power of the Beatles. The song is so good that the cover version didn't tank at 50. It goes to number 6. Like,
Hmm.
how does that happen? Because the song is excellent. Are you kidding me? Yeah, and you're talking about the version by Earth, Wind, and Fire is, of course, from the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band film. Have you seen that movie?
I am not.
I was a kid when I saw that film. I don't remember a lot about it, and I've not watched it. I don't think since I was a kid. I don't know if it was good then. I don't know if it's good now. Like you certainly can't take away anything away from the Bee Gees. Phenomenal band in their own right. Amazing voices, harmonies unmatched. but I just wonder if the movie's any good. Is this one of Paul's most well-known songs, you think? And that's a big ask because he's got a ton, but this has got to be up there, isn't it?
I think it has to be.
The arrangement includes a harmonium and acoustic guitar. Yeah, the original version of the track, anyway. And then, of course, things change as they go through the process. Very much a hippie song, I guess you could say, if you wanted branded at that as that. But dude, at its best, it's a Beatles song. It's Paul and lead vocal. The music's brilliant. It's beautiful. Like I just I don't know. Again, we're searching for deep meaning. Maybe not we, but people always for this band. But there's not a lot of deep meaning here. It's just a really, really good song. I mean, this album's not the same without this song, is it?
No, I don't think it is.
I think it fits. I think again, if we're asking the question what fits, I think this song very much fits. Well, kids, we've done it. We've reached the end. We got one more track left. As with a lot of things the Beatles have done in their careers, there's not a lot of things that I've ever had conversations with about people where they'll say, "Oh, I'm just okay with what they did. I'm okay with that song." A lot of times you really love it or you just hate it. And Tomorrow Never Knows. Phil, I think what an amazing way to end this album is Tomorrow Never Knows. Never Knows. 3 minutes on the dot. John Lennon song, of course, played in the chord of C, I believe, through the entire song. It's the crescendo of this album. It's their way of saying, you thought you knew who we were. You don't know anything yet. And that's to me what I hear when I hear this song. And honestly, I've always liked this song, dude. It's far out, but it's John. It's different. It's him exploring. It's the Beatles demanding to evolve and to do something different. I've always enjoyed this song. What do you think about Tomorrow Never Knows?
I can take it or leave it. I don't really hate it, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite song of the album either. You can definitely see the Indian influence. You can see that in George's attempt at it earlier in the album, and this is kind of John's attempt at it. And I feel like the kind of existential, avant-garde stuff that John does later in his career works well with this vibe of music. It works well with this tone of music. But again, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite song in the album.
It's not my favorite, but I've always been a fan of the song. And there's just something about it. I mean, can you call this a Beatles song? Or is
Eh,
this just more of a John song?
it's a Beatles song. I think that this definitely fits this era of Beatles music. It definitely fits where they were at that time in their lives. Um, if you can say that this was a period where um, John bought in. It's funny, like taking this from now and seeing this as like the era where John was buying in, and then you get all the way up to Sexy Sadie, where he is just like, "No, I'm completely out of this. This was a sham."
Right.
So yeah, I think it fits if you follow who they were at that time as individuals as well. Um, yeah, I don't know why people would hate it. I feel like this is one of those things where um, like I said, based on how much you know about them as a band. But then again, I guess I can understand if this is just you listening to it on first reaction because we're listening to this after the fact. Of course, we're listening to this and judging it based on what we knew about them at that time period. So yeah, I can understand that.
This one's about drugs as well, LSD, and also the psychedelic experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary knew a little something about drugs, Phil. That was published in '64. He and John were bros, I think. I think the band had met him and hung out or whatever. Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast, tackles one of the most popular and critically acclaimed series of our time, bringing together three hosts from two different parts of the world. Two Nations reviews all 3 seasons of Ted Lasso, 34 episodes total, with wrap-up episodes coming at the end of each season. Follow the show on social media at Two Nations Pod, and be sure to subscribe and download on all the major platforms. Just look us up, Two Nations Podcast. So the Beatles recording employed musical elements foreign to pop music, included musique concrete, avant-garde composition, and electro-acoustic sound manipulation. It does feature an Indian-inspired modal backing of lambura and sitar drone, Drone. There's a great sound for this, or word for this sound. This is exactly what it is. And bass guitar with minimal harmonic deviation from a single chord, underpinned by a constant but non-standard drum pattern. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. I got nothing left after that because this perfectly describes this. I mean, it's just consistent, droning on one chord, and again, something different. Like it's just, I've always applauded these guys for going down roads not traveled very often, and like just imagine how many people sounded like this after they did this song. How many bands went down the road after they did it?
Yeah, I think that's also the interesting thing about the Beatles and John in particular is John would make a song like this and something like I always go back to Dick a Pony because he always remarked that that song was nonsense. He'll just do something that's experimental and everybody else is like in awe of this thing. Like, all right, how can I make music like that? And he's just like, I just kind of made something while I was high. All right.
Yeah, I don't really remember how I did it. Yeah, the song's backwards guitar parts. And as we said on side one review of this album, kids, they had reversed sounds in their music for the first time ever done in music, in rock music, pop music, whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it happens here as well. I mean, that's just nuts. Again, again, adventurous is the best way to describe this band. They're just willing to try anything.
Yeah, it definitely was influential. You can see that in stuff from that time period as well. Like when you mention this song and just kind of sound the tone of it and backwards guitar, I immediately think of Castles Made of Sand
Mm,
and how that's also from that time period and just how much psychedelic rock was in it.
great song. Love that song. On release, the song was the source of confusion and ridicule by many fans and journalists. It has since received praise as an effective representation of a psychedelic experience. I think we could say this another way, Phil. People just didn't get it.
Yeah, and that's why I had to stop myself. I understand the knee jerk reaction at that time of looking around like, what is this? What is this like Indian toned psychedelic rock? But I don't think people had the sophistication to critique it at the time because at the time you're looking at it like, what is this band doing now? Like, what is this?
Yeah. And, to be fair, this Tibetan Book of the Dead, which as Beatles fans we've heard about for years since this song and before, John supposedly read that while he was high on LSD. Makes a lot of sense for me. Supposedly, he bought the book, went home, took LSD, followed the instructions exactly as stated in the text. The book held that the ego death experienced under the influence of LSD and other psychedelic drugs is essential, similar to the dying process, and requires similar guidance. This is a state of being known by Eastern mystics and masters as samadhi, I think, which is being totally aware at the present moment of pointedness of mind. In other words, being high. So there we are.
Yeah, when you just talked about Death of the Ego, we didn't even get into the all of the clues from this album if you're one of those Paul McCartney death conspiracy guys.
Enlighten
Because
us, Phil. Enlighten us.
isn't "God to Get You Into My Life" one of those songs that is a big part of the conspiracy of if Paul is really dead? Because supposedly the first verse of the song describes the car accident that killed him.
Yeah, I was alone. I took a ride. I didn't know what I would find there. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
Such a weird conspiracy theory. If you go down the rabbit hole of this stuff and go and look at all of this stuff, like people making those side by side comparisons to Paul as he got older and like, look, this isn't him. His ears are different. Like the structure of his jawline is different. It's like no, this guy just got older. I'm sorry. He no longer looks like a teenage boy anymore.
Yeah. Funny how that happens. Kids, you can go on YouTube right now and go down the rabbit hole, and I promise you, you'll be there for 3 hours.
Yeah, and I mean,
It's crazy.
it is crazy, and it lines up with Paul's change in his like I explained earlier his peak in creativity, like his change in the way he played bass, the changes in how he wrote music. It lines up with people like, oh no, this is a different artist. That's not Paul McCartney. It's Billy Shears.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and then of course the next album after this album is Sergeant Pepper, which coincidentally is a song where an album where it's a concept album where it's a different lead singer. So yeah, very weird conspiracy.
He's the tallest guy. He was tall on the album cover, and he was not the tallest Beatle. And like he was standing on something, the others weren't. You idiots! Like, what are we doing here?
Paul is the walrus.
Paul is the walrus. That's the truth. That's the truth. Here's another clue for you all. Yeah, God, there's so much good stuff. The cover of Abbey Road alone has so much stuff there that none of it's true. None of it.
Yeah, but everybody makes the interpretations.
Yes, absolutely. Well, kids, as far as we know, Paul McCartney's still with us. The original Paul McCartney. And by the way, there's a movie on that.
Is there?
It's very tongue in cheek. It's very low budget. It's ridiculous. And I don't, when I call it a movie, I don't even know if it's past 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah, it's worth watching. It's worth your time.
Very, very creepy and trippy stuff.
Dude, a friend of mine that I've known for years who's always, he shall remain nameless. He's always been a Beatles fan, but one day we're talking about this and he is legit. He is legit. And after a few minutes of this, I'm like, dude, please tell me you're messing with me. Nah, man, listen. And he starts hitting me. And I'm like, we've both heard the same stories for years. We've been fans for years. You know that's not. And dude, he wouldn't stop. He just kept on, kept on. I'm like, all right. I'm starting to get a little scared for my friend because, like,
he's one of those truthers that believes Paul's dead.
yes, he did at the time. Whether he does now, I don't know. So yeah, that was a little
Yeah.
concerning for me, but you know,
Very weird stuff that the show had to go on, and um, in order to keep the band going, they had to put somebody in his place because they couldn't just end it. There was too much money to be made. It was the biggest act, one of the biggest acts in the world. So you couldn't just admit that he was gone. You had to keep the show going, and that's part of what caused later the fracture of the group. If you follow the conspiracy, that new Paul had grown out of control, and that's why we get what happened later to the group.
that's such good stuff, man. That's such good stuff. I love it. Kids, we've done it. We've reached the end. For real this time. This is Revolver. Two sides covered of a fantastic album that continues to stand the test of time. And as I vouched for in part one of this particular review, go out of your way to listen to the big honking deluxe package. It's not called that, but I call it that. It is phenomenal. The sound is, it's heavenly is what it is. It sounds amazing, and it's well worth your time. Phil, in the grand scheme of things, you know what? I usually tell you don't have to rank it. I'm not doing that this time. Rank this album for Beatles albums. Where is it in the top 10? What number do you have it?
That's kind of tough.
Yep.
I would say it's around 5. If it's not 5, it's at least 6. I think it's definitely one of their most important albums. But if I rank it based on my enjoyment of Beatles albums, I don't think it's in my top 5.
You know what? I think I'm inclined to agree with you a little. Top 5, that's hard because, there's Abbey Road. Oh my God, dude, there's so many. Like, there's just so many. Sergeant Pepper, Abbey Road, Let It Be. Dude, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, as divisive as I think their last few albums are, I am a big fan of Let It Be. I think it's one of their better albums. Um, I also really enjoy the White Album for what it is. I don't know.
I enjoy Let It Be as well. And that's not a popular take. I don't care for the orchestrated version of Long and Winding Road because once you hear the version with the piano, it's much better. But I actually love the album. I think Phil Spector did what he could do, and honestly, I don't hate it like a lot of people do. My kid was at the right age when he could start, being a little bit of a person. He's a toddler that's walking and talking. He can sing along. So he wanted to hear two of us. He just wanted to hear it. And at the bit where he says that we're on our way home. One day we're in the car, and right after they sing that bit, my son goes, "And we are on our way home." because we were going home that day, and that just hit me a certain kind of way, and I'm like, oh, I love my kid to death.
It's like Hi Dad Soup for you.
Yeah, really, yeah. Oh man, good stuff. Yeah, I don't dislike that album at all. And dude, it goes back to show you, or at least prove to me anyway, that like albums can hold a place with you and connect with you based on you, not based on what a critic says or even what that band says. It's based on how it hits you at a certain point and how it connects to you, right? Because music connects to people in so many different ways on so many different levels, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely depends on when you discover an album. I think because for a lot of us, music is a soundtrack for periods in our lives. And so
Mm,
I think when you discover an album, regardless of how it was received at the time when it was released, you're always going to connect it with that time period and when you listen to it the most. And I think sometimes we go through things and for whatever reason, we're connecting with this music. And so you just can't discount that experience. And that's why I'm always of the belief of no, make up your mind about what music is to you. It's great to have things like reviews and have all these scores and stuff that people give these things in magazines or on their YouTubes, but no, it's up to you to decide what an album means to you, and that's why I said I think this album is extremely important. When you talk about the importance to this band, I feel like it probably belongs in the top five. I think if you like compare this to like the history of the Beatles and all these other things, it probably belongs in the top five. But when it comes to my personal enjoyment, I don't think it's in my top five.
that's fair. And you're right, man. You can listen to reviews all day, but it depends on if something connects you to a certain part of your life. Like Grace by Jeff Buckley, for my money, is one of the best albums ever recorded. He's gone way too soon.
Yeah,
Fantastic artist, brilliant songwriter. And that album came to me during a breakup.
yeah,
And the tone is perfect for a breakup. However, it's not such a sad record that I can't continue to listen to it today because it's so masterful.
yeah. I feel the same way. I'm a fan of Radiohead, and I don't know if Moon Shaped Pool would have fit as well with me. That's one of their last albums, Moon Shaped Pool, and it is a great album, but it's a very depressing album. It's a very depressing album,
Mm.
and I don't know if I would have connected as well with that album if I wasn't also very depressed at the time. Um, and so I feel like it hits me differently.
Yeah, I've got a lot of those. I got a lot of those. As I'm sure a lot of the listeners do, for sure. Well, kids, there you have it. There is Revolver. Hope you enjoyed this one. Listen back to the other episode. You got nothing but time. And just listen to this. I think you'll enjoy it. Phil, we're going to take this home, my friend. Give me your last word on Revolver.
I think it is a very important Beatles album. I feel like it's extremely influential. Um, whether it's one of your favorite Beatles albums or not, you can't deny just how iconic it is, just from the illustration cover uh, to songs like Taxman and "Got to Get You Into Your Life." It's just such a important album for them. There's no denying that.
No doubt about it. You can love or hate this band, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're chronicling this band's career, then you have to say that Rubber Soul and Revolver as a 1-2 punch. As a 1-2 punch, you could be a band and produce both of these albums and maybe call it a day and never record again and have enough money to live on because of royalties and have made your contribution to the music business. And I'm not overstating that. I think any band would kill to make either one of these albums for their career. But this band made amazing music before and made amazing music after, which is freaking nuts to me. I'll never not be awed by the musicianship, by the creativity, by the willingness to dive deeper and go beyond what they had always done, which I think is very cool. So yeah, big Beatles fans here, kids, in case you can't tell. And that is Revolver. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.